Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. It's great to see and start off, 2024 with I think I'm going to learn a lot. Great presentation coming up from Eileen Asher. Um, this is our first gathering of the virtual lunch and learn series from Zettabytes today, and we are going to have at least once a month for the next 12 months scheduled. And we are, for this year, using our LinkedIn channel and page for Zettabytes today for all the announcements and events that will come up. So I strongly encourage everybody to follow us on our LinkedIn page, and also, of course, register for all the events coming up. With that, I will hand over to Eileen. Take it away. Let us know who you are, and then, what are we going to learn today?
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody tuning in today. I'm super excited. So I will disclose that you guys are going to be my guinea pigs today. Um, I've been working on this presentation for quite some time, but finally getting to the speaking part of it and actually presenting. So I'm very, I hope that you'll be patient with me. So I appreciate everybody's patience and experience, and I'm looking forward to having some great conversations. This is going to be a little there'll be some opportunity for interaction, so please feel free to chime in when I'll let you know. I'll ask questions. So really looking forward to it. So this is how to cheat your brand standards. My name is Eileen Asher. I am a brand and marketing specialist in Columbus, Ohio. So I'm obviously a very big proponent of using a brand standard as someone who creates them on the regular. But there are a few occasions where you might have to break the rules just a little bit. And there's one reason in particular, and that's to make your materials accessible. And we'll talk about that. Let's see. So a quick little thing about me. Like I said, I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I work for the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio as the brand and marketing specialist. But I also have my own freelance business as well. My specialties are with brand design and graphic design in particular, but when I'm not working on those things, I don't take the design hat off. I am currently the co-president of the Columbus Society of Communication Arts, and I also serve as a board member for the Center for Disability Empowerment. So that's where a lot of my inspiration came from, is working with this organization and making sure that their materials are accessible, and and trying to just make sure that everybody knows that accessibility is is everybody's responsibility. But I really found my stride in education and the nonprofit sectors. I've been a designer since 2015, and making sure that having equitable and accessible design practices is the main thing that I focus on. I'm currently pursuing a certification with the IAAP for accessibility core, professional and accessibility core competencies, and also a certification in document accessibility. And IAAP stands for the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. Now, saying all that, I also would like to put up another disclaimer that I am not necessarily an expert. Accessibility is a constant learning journey. The technology changes, there are new perspectives, there are new laws that are in place, new guidelines come up every day. So that what might be true today in certain aspects might not necessarily be true tomorrow. But with that being said, always listen to the disabled, the people with disabilities that are telling you this is what we need, and then follow those guidelines. So this is, again, just a learning journey. I don't want to put myself as the expert. The people with disabilities, they're the experts in what they need. But these are just a few helpful guidelines that might be able to, that you can incorporate in your own brand standards and your own design practice to help that, to mitigate some of that struggle. So this is a quote that I like to use a lot in my everyday to kind of center myself and remind myself that even though it's a process, this is still worth it. That every design decision has the potential to include or exclude people. And especially from a business standpoint, you would like to include as many people as humanly possible to either buy your product or your service or just join your community. But design has that unique ability to be able to include or exclude, and we would like to include as many people as possible. So for those that are not quite familiar with what a brand standard might be, a definition of sorts um, is that there's, excuse me, let me reorient myself here. If you don't deal with brands every day, like I do, or maybe you only deal with one in particular, if it's your own business or if it's the company that you work for, um, one, every brand needs a standard, and that's almost mandatory. It's your instruction manual for how to use it. It is a guide providing direction and guidance to ensure that branding is consistent across all your platforms, no matter who creates the content, whether that's the designer. In my case, I'm the one creating all the content, so I have to follow my own rules. Or if you have other teams that are making sales content versus some of your other marketing, social media content, if it's different teams, different individuals, that all of that content looks the same across all platforms. Um, Now every designer will want you to follow these to the letter, and that's awesome. I preach all the time to my staff in particular, please help me help you make everything look nice and pretty. And I have to, and sometimes it's like pulling teeth. I understand that. There's nothing more disheartening than spending hours on crafting these specific instructions for your brand, only to have someone in HR post uh, have a like a flyer for a bowling night in Comic Sans. It's really disappointing. But it happens. So there's a few occasions where breaking the rules might be necessary, and that's something that we can do strategically and with great care. And that reason is for accessibility. So a couple of if you need a business case to present to any administrators or any leadership, the case for accessibility is it helps drive innovation, it enhances your brand, it will also extend your market reach, and it definitely minimizes your legal risk. There are laws, especially in the US, through the Americans with Disabilities Act, where you do have to provide a basic level of accessibility for everybody. There are laws that if someone were to find an error on your website or a web page is not easily accessible, that is something that they could take up and and bring up legal action for. That is one definite way of making sure that your stuff is accessible. But if you're looking to just include people in general and have more people look at your product or your service, there is over 1 billion people with spending power of more than $6 trillion. So if that's not a little motivation to, get some of your materials in order, um, it's definitely a money case, but it also drives innovation from accessibility standpoint. New features and products and services solve unanticipated problems. So if the business case doesn't sell, then you also have the human case. There are 2.2 million people with a vision impairment. There are 246 million people that have low vision in general, and then even 5 to 10% of that population have dyslexia. So keeping in mind that there are people with different needs, that's a lot of people that might not be able to see your website or see a flyer, um, especially a lot with people over the age of 50. disability is not a matter of if you have it, but when you will have it. So keeping that in mind, but ultimately it's the right thing to do. It's for people. You're trying to serve your community, your people, and thinking about these millions of people that would be able to join the conversation with your business, your nonprofit, your product, or anything else in this case. So putting some of these concepts into, now you have the why, now we can get into the how, and how you can cheat within your brand standard to make things even better, and how to adapt to these accessibility standards. So the first big thing that you can do within your brand standard, and that everybody, hopefully every brand standard has, your color palette and text and font requirements. Contrast and color is a big thing, especially in accessibility, for those with especially low vision. Now I'll say everything on this slide is a part of my personal brand standard. The green is mine, the yellow, we handpicked the yellow, the orange. That first row of buttons, as an example, technically fall within the brand standard. I don't think they're all that pretty. They're kind of hard to read. I'll be perfectly honest. But that second row, being able to make a change and cheat the standard a little bit. I use a lot of black and white text. That definitely helps with a lot of accessibility changes, or accessibility. Excuse me. I apologize, and I appreciate everybody for their patience. But this is a perfect example of a simple change that you can use to make something more accessible. And all of these buttons on the second row still are part of my brand standard. I would consider them for use in PDFs or on my website as perfect examples that would just make something a lot easier. So another example of what some design choices we can use. Again, all of these are part of my brand standard. That one on the far left, maybe not the best. That's my orange. That's an orange filter over a photo I took. But you can't really read the text. That's the same green that you see in the little smiley faces up top. But it's really, really hard to read. It actually kind of gives me a bit of a headache. So one simple change that I can make is switching over to the white. That already looks a lot better, but I kind of like going with the green. I like the green, having that little pop, the extra pop of color, but that darker green works. You can actually see it a lot better, but it's not technically part of my standards. So something that I do that might help, and it was gonna be part of your conversation with your designer ultimately as well, is expanding your color palette. Is one, aside from just making switches in like black and white text over top of busy backgrounds, but expanding your color palette is one way to really cheat in your brand standards for accessibility purposes. So this is my full color palette. The gray arrows that are pointing towards each little color, those are I guess, the main color palette that I use. But then you can see that there's variations and shades of each option. So that definitely helps with giving a little more flexibility, a little more room to grow. And it will definitely spark some conversation between either your in-house design team or your external design team. They may have to go back and rewrite the rules a little bit. That they might have their 4 main colors and they want to stick with them, but for accessibility purposes, you might have to adjust those a little bit to allow for a lighter shade of gray on a darker background. So this is one way that you can go back to your team to talk about expanding your color palette in particular. It's going to give you a lot more options and a little less feeling guilty about cheating your own design, your own brand standard. So these were all colors that I was able to pull out within my color palette. And now even within each category, I have a range of options to choose from for different designs. Something else that is also great for something to consider, a lot of brand standards should have font choices, specifically curated fonts and typefaces that your brand should be using. I think we have maybe 2 or 3 at the ESC that we use consistently, and I use mostly Avenir for mine is my font of choice for this presentation. But whatever fonts that you might be using, here's some basic considerations that you should be using within your brand standards. Making sure that your fonts have clear extension or simple with clear extensions for your lowercase and uppercase letters. I love a good sans serif that is usually pretty accessible for a lot of folks. Letters are less, they're more distinguishable between each letter next to each other with a sans serif. If you can, that first little category, hello, it looks a little hard to read. There's some of the extensions in between the letters are really, really thin. It's kind of hard to connect between, even though the letters are close to each other, it's kind of hard to connect to read as well as the one underneath it, which is HELLO. And then that middle a middle column, we can ensure that make sure that your spacing isn't too squished or too wide. For those nerds like me, that's called kerning. But making sure that your letters are evenly spaced, that helps with folks reading, especially. And then for that third category, this is something that I've had to write into my brand standards and the ESCs. Please use decorative fonts sparingly, only for headings, headlines. They don't work well for body copy in cases like this. It's a lot more intimidating to see that black wall of text on the far right than it is to see that sans serif paragraph underneath. It looks a lot more welcoming and clear and legible to view.
Hey, Eileen, can I
Yeah,
ask you a quick or make a quick comment here?
yeah, please.
One of the things that I discovered earlier in my sort of web design life, uh, that the Lighthouse for the Blind actually has a used to have it. I don't know whether they have it anymore, but 20 years ago they had a whole recommendation of what type of fonts
Mhm.
are good for people with low vision or and those types of environment. So it completely fits with what you're suggesting here. But for others, I'm just saying that that's a good reference point to go to their website if it still exists um, and get their font recommendations.
There's definitely a lot of recommendations. I know there's some type houses or excuse me. There's a lot of type designers that will have specifically accessible typefaces. I know there's one for dyslexia
Right.
that has that has thicker lines towards the bottom, so the reader can and it makes the letters seem like they're more stagnant, so they're less likely to like shift in the reader's mind, and
Right.
it weighs the text down. So that there's considerations for anybody with any sort of either vision or learning disability or anything like
Disabilities.
that.
Right.
So that's a
Right.
perfect example of using doing the research of who your audience is, but also keeping in mind that there are lots of options and lots of recommendations. It's not
Absolutely.
just Calibri or Arial. Um, there are lots and lots of options. So thank you. I appreciate that. I'll have to look that up. Okay. I appreciate everybody's patience. Um, so we've talked about colors and contrast. We've talked about some font considerations. Let's put those together and what layout can look like. Just because I know for some folks, when they hear accessibility, they want to think just a plain white piece of paper, boring font, no pictures. That's not even accessible, actually. That's a wall of text and that's no fun to read. Layout for your designs as well is also something that you can make that makes a huge difference. Making sure that everything follows a linear, logical, simple path. You can break things up with headings and images, even videos and photos, in keeping your content short and clear and simple. And from a marketing standpoint, I would much rather read 2 or 3 bullets on a web page to get the idea of a product over a whole wall of jargon that just I like, okay, I don't need to know all of these things, nor do I have time or the focus to. But breaking things up and showing me images and video, that's also very accessible as well, especially for somebody that might not have uh, that might be who that might be either if they're either vision impaired, they might be able to listen to a video or listen to a transcript of something that would be far more accessible to them than just looking at a web page. Having that as an option is awesome. So that keeping things nice and simple and clean will not only create a better design for you in your brand standard overall, but it's also just because it helps a specific group of people. Also helps the grand scheme of things. There's a lot of people that gravitate more toward these clean layouts than they would a giant massive wall of text. So keeping these layout considerations and even writing them again, going back to your design team, having them write these standards is awesome. Being able to break up the page is a great way to make things accessible for a lot of folks.
Eileen, another quick question about the layout.
Mhm.
These days things have become much more better with these hooks to a web page that, I mean, simple things like closed captioning, right?
Yes.
Similar hooks are available elsewhere. So would that be a big part of the consideration as to what hooks people can use in order to transform the layout, and make it compatible to those hooks more than, focusing on just the layout? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Question I'm
absolutely.
asking? Okay.
Oh yeah, using there a lot of like website builders and stuff like that will have ready-made templates which already break things into a picture on one side and text on the other. Um, and even I know, but I use general layouts like these when I'm creating PDFs, not just for websites in particular, but I have to make a lot of printed pieces
Right.
um, in my line of work, and having just like a basic template that I'm able to just plug in is awesome. But there's lots of website platforms that will let you that already have ready-made stuff ready to go, and that's super helpful, especially from someone who's not a website designer. That definitely helps me. There's a lot of options. And so that brings us to another way that we can make accessible materials. This is something else that I've also had to work with here at the ESC is instituting rules for our alternative text and making sure that that is everybody's responsibility when they give me content. As a designer, a lot of times people just like to give me, here's the who, what, when, where, why, here's maybe a few pictures, and make it pretty. That is awesome, and I can do that, but to create really accessible materials, I'm going to need a little bit more context with my work. For alternative text, this is a great way to provide a text alternative for non-text content and web and social media pages, whether that's video, especially with photos. And it has a couple main purposes, which is either to be read by a screen reader. If somebody is low vision or blind, they're able to have a computer read the screen for them, but the computer can't just look at a picture and tell them what it is. Alt text lets people hear what the image and either is doing or what the function is for it. A lot of times it's displayed in place of an image when something won't load. If you ever had a page that just the file's too big or something like that, there'll be a little X in the corner where the photo's supposed to be, and then hopefully a description. Sometimes they'll just say picture or image, and like, okay, well, if it's a graph, that doesn't help me and it won't load. What do I do? But also another thing, another bonus with alt text as well, is it's also great for your SEO, your search engine optimization, because that is another piece of information that the search engine can read and associate with your page. So for cases like this, like just as an example, if I were to use an image here, alt text would be a smiling person in a yellow suit holding an orange laptop. And for this purposes, it's a little decorative, but if it were showing statistics of the 2.2 million people that are that have low vision, then that alt text would be able to describe that image for me and show exactly and to tell me what is happening instead of just showing me.
So this is like literal, a picture is 1,000 words.
Yes, exactly. It is exactly like that. Short, sweet, to the point. You don't have to write a novel about it. I don't have to write about what type of computer she's holding or what her makeup looks like or anything like that. Just in this case, it's a person holding a laptop and she's wearing it's bright and shiny yellow, something positive, short, sweet, to the point. What we do in our brand standards is when we have it written into our brand standards that when we're posting on social media, we include an alt text description in the body of the post itself. So we have the picture attached, but then and then we have our written content about, oh, super excited to be working on this partnership with Franklin County Children's Services. But then at the end of that post, we say image description, group of children are playing on a playground. And that helps anybody that might be that can't even see the photo or the photo might load. They know what the context is. And we actually have that written in our standards. And I ask people a lot of the time, if they're giving me photos, what the heck is happening here? If it's just for decorative purposes, then okay, then I'll still give a quick descriptor of what the image is showing, but I love being able to actually put the text either in there's all either like a lot of social platforms in Instagram, it's a little hard to get to, but you can do a add your alt text on the side. LinkedIn makes it very, very easy. But if you're working with your team, I usually ask, what is happening in this photo? And I'm getting in and it's a new habit for me, but I'm asking, how can I explain what this photo is? How can I describe it to people? And that is, we use alt text in our PDFs as well. So not only do we have that where the layout comes in, an established reading order for the computer to relay all the written text, but that it can also read the images as well. And there's options for social media for you to put in alternative text on the back end when you post as well. And it's one extra step, but it's one extra step that is going to help a lot of people. And I highly recommend writing these instructions within your brand standard so it makes everybody's responsibility is accessibility. So we're gonna put we're gonna put all of that together, and this is the interactive part of it. I want to know what you guys think of, what you folks think of these 3 examples. What works, what doesn't, what could be a little more complicated, how can we change it? I want to hear your opinions on, let's start with the pink one on the left. What's some pros, some cons? What can we change? Shout it out.
Contrast could definitely be better.
Yes, absolutely.
Font is challenging in some of them, either too small or too wonky.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I can't even read what it says.
See, I can read nightclub and then
The
disco,
disco,
maybe
yes.
14, so I at least know what the date is. That's nice. Anything else might be a little like, it's pink. But that love in big metallic
Oh,
letters.
it's love.
I
Yes.
didn't know it was love either.
Exactly.
I was going, maybe it's Jeeve, Jeve. I don't know.
It is, yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's a really cool design. It's modern, it's shiny, it's eye-catching, but you can't read it. So what would the point be in this case? And that's definitely a glaring accessibility issue that, yeah, it looks cool, but if I can't read it, why do I care? What's the point? So that's definitely one. It's bold, it's pretty, but it's not usable. That doesn't help. So let's go to this like wedding invite in the middle here. What are some pros and cons for this one?
I'm trying to find what's right with it, but I'm trying not to. I couldn't find a way to say something nice about it. But it's like really like it's lacking the alt text. It's lacking anything to grab my eye aside from the text that's there.
Mm-hmm.
That's,
I'd say one good thing is that at least there's some contrast, which is nice. But I mean, the letters are spaced out, which is, you can read it, but it might be a little too spaced out in some cases. The kerning might be a little hard to read. I mean, it's simple. I might not need an image description for this one. It just says, "Welcome to our love story. We're happy you're here." Okay, I got the point of the invite, but it
I have no idea why there's a vertical line or what, I mean, the choices. So that
Mhm.
probably it has no issues with, accessibility. But,
it is a little like
the brand doesn't evoke anything.
right, exactly. It might be a little it might just be like, it's definitely text heavy. A computer could easily, like a screen reader could easily read it, but it's boring. It took the accessibility almost to the far other end. It's now boring. And sometimes I know script text is a little hard to read for some folks when letters connect like that. Not very dyslexia friendly for sure. So yeah, all of those are correct. Absolutely. So let's look at that third one on the far right. We've got a little more color, a little more layout. What are some pros and cons of this one? I know it's a little small.
Stephanie, you saying something? You're on mute.
I can see the contrast on this one. Take 2.
Yes, agreed. That the color makes things pop. Even the header or the headline, as much as it's a decorative font, but it's large enough. I can pick it out from the orange background, and I didn't use it for body text for any of this. It's it's easily legible. So for all the important information that you can see, setting a goal, making a plan, taking action, be persistent, even if it's tiny, I can still read it. So that's awesome. That definitely provides that contrast. Anything else?
I'm curious about what people think about the little stars, because personally I find them distracting and that they don't really add. But, then I hear things about, oh, you need to have something visual to break up the space. And I don't know, okay, is this doing that? Is this actually, do people look at this and think that they add, or if it were me, I would get rid of all of them.
Absolutely. And that might be part of a design choice for from my perspective. It might just be a design choice to break up some space, but it's not going, if a screen reader is reading it, it's going to skip right over it. So that it's background information, don't need it. It's just there to be pretty. That would be a perfect example of if I'm making a PDF in InDesign, just labeling it as decorative. The screen reader will skip right over it and just get to the heart of the information, which in this case is going to be the text. The text is the star here. Unintended. Any other comments? Any other thoughts?
Alicia, you had a question in the chat. You want to just ask it?
Yeah. So I have an issue with alt text. I always used to fill it out whenever I would post any images on my website.
Mhm.
But then when AI hit and I was like heavily on Twitter, a lot of the designers and artists that I follow started to realize that the AI generated images were being taken from that alt text. So a lot of their works were being stolen through that. And so a lot of people stopped using alt text, and I didn't know like if there was something created yet to allow that accessibility for everyone else while also not ruining a lot of artists' life with the stealing of images.
That is a very good question. I have not discovered a like a strategy around that. I still I have my own thoughts on AI and especially with artist stolen work. And without getting, without reading myself that much. It's That is a good question. I have not found a way to like I would still opt to use alt text, or maybe the option is to keep the alt text in your description and the actual post itself, or mark it as the picture if it's on a web page, like mark it as decorative or something like that. But and make sure that all of that same content is still in text form somewhere on a web page, for example, so the person doesn't miss anything. Definitely, that is a fine line, and I haven't quite figured that out yet. I'll be perfectly honest. I still would probably use alt text, but then be prepared to have it like in like in one of the first comments or something as part of a thread, or in the actual body of the description for social purposes. That is very interesting. I have to do a little more digging on that, because I'm as an artist, a part-time artist, I would greatly appreciate my work not being stolen. So I can understand that plight for sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for asking. That was a very good question. I want to learn more about that. All right. So we already talked about some of the pros and cons with some of these, and all great. You guys all brought up exactly the points that we're trying to make here. But there's pros and cons to everything. And again, it's a learning journey. And always room for error. There's a lot of times where I make multiple versions of something, and then somebody says, hey, you forgot alt text in this little spot here, and then I make another PDF, and that's okay. It's journey. So a couple other real quick to kind of start wrapping some things up. a couple other ways that you can write into your brand standards for some of these to make your brand more accessible, using a combination of text, colors, shapes, and patterns to convey meaning, especially with infographics. Not just if you're using a pie graph and you've got multiple colors, add some patterns into the different sections. That also helps a lot of people with low vision to distinguish between the different sections instead of just using color. Because if it's all shades of red or green and you're red, green blind, then can't tell what you're looking at either. Using subtitles and providing transcripts for your videos, especially on social and embedded videos on websites. You can either, I like the computer generated options are great, but it's even better if you can use a service that will actually, like we use Rev here at the ESC to transcribe all of our videos. Sometimes the computer generated captions don't pick up on certain words, or they'll mishear something and it's not quite right and the context is off and it doesn't work. Using Rev is a real easy way for us to make sure that our content is clear and understandable. And then we can also use that information with our transcripts on our website pages and stuff like that. So Instagram Reels and TikTok have gotten really good at transcribing and providing captions for those videos as well. I would highly recommend using those features. And it's especially useful for even if someone is not someone who has a tendency to look at her phone at work and during downtime. I'm watching videos with no sound on. And if I can't understand what's happening, I'm going to scroll right past it. So that's an example of somebody, like I have full vision and I can hear really well, but I'm not using sound. So for all intents and purposes, I'm watching a video deaf, and captions are awesome. I love me some captions. And then using descriptive headings with your links and your call to actions and your buttons, saying contact us instead of click here. So even those buttons in the very beginning that were saying click here, like I would change those. Like if I want someone to contact me or like email me, and then use that button. Being able to be descriptive with your links so people know where they're going, what is expected of them when they try to complete an action. Instead of just saying click here. Okay, well, am I downloading something? Am I filling out a form? What happens when I click here? Oh, contact us. Like, okay, well, I can expect to either fill out a form or send an email or something like that. That helps a lot of folks, especially with anxiety like me. I want to know what I'm doing before I click on something. Also limiting your use of underlined and italic text in your typography guidelines is awesome. Left aligned text is a great way to keep people's eyes from drifting all over a page. When text is centered, usually creates little rivers in between text, and that's kind of hard to read, especially for somebody with dyslexia. Keeping everything left aligned keeps everybody steady, and keeping that consistent throughout your whole layout. So if there's one section that if you start off with left aligned, should be left aligned through the rest of the document. That's very helpful. And keeping that in your guidelines is awesome. Making sure that these rules are actually written within your standard is going to make everybody understand, is going to make accessibility everybody's responsibility. And that's ultimately what we're looking for here. So from one designer to another, if you need an excuse to take this back to your team, or if you're a designer yourself and need to explain to people, sometimes you have to break the rules. This is your official permission slip. This is, you can tell them, I am trained, I am certified graphic designer. I am telling you, sometimes you're allowed to break the rules. You're allowed to cheat your brand standards. Feel free to actually use this. They're welcome to contact me, and I will be glad to give this presentation all over again. I would appreciate the practice. But we need to make sure that We are holding our administrators, our designers, everybody in the line of content creation accountable for making materials accessible. If there's a reason that something is, if you're using a light gray on a light white background, and that's the color that's in the brand standard, okay, change it, cheat. It's fine. This is your permission slip. In the case of accessibility, this is it. Please feel free. We need to make sure that we are holding folks accountable for the reasons of for the business case, for the human case, keeping everybody accountable. This is the way to go. A couple resources that I use to check my work. The Wave Accessibility Checker is a great browser resource that I scan. You can input an address, a website address, and it will scan and give you all sorts of options of what you should be looking for. If the headings aren't labeled, or if there's alt text missing, that's a great website to show you where you can start making changes for your website materials to be accessible. I use the accessible color palette through GitHub. In the middle there, you can have that. This is a great opportunity where you can input you can find different levels of blue that will work, and you can expand your color palette like we were talking about. This is a great resource for really finding all of the accessible color combinations that your brand could be capable of. And then Who Can Use on the far right is another way to ensure like accessible color combinations, but it also shows you what colors look like with other vision issues. If somebody who's red, green, blind or something like that, what text boxes look like and what color combinations look like in different cases. And I love using that website a lot because sometimes I'm a visual person, so being able to see what another person is seeing definitely helps me, and it helps me make better design decisions. And I love all these resources, and there's a whole bunch more too, but these are my top 3 that I use quite frequently. And that's my presentation. So if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to stick around and answer. I know I've probably gone over a little bit of your time here, but I appreciate everybody being patient with me and being my guinea pig.
Well, as we wrap up, questions, people.
Eileen, I have a question. So I am not at all a designer. I'm very much in the analytics world, but I do find myself wanting to use our brand guidelines, and I find them inaccessible.
Problem number 1.
I have a challenge looking at our brand guidelines and honestly making sense of them in some cases. Do you have any suggestions about who I would reach out to just to understand in some cases what they're talking about, or like what is reasonable for somebody in a very different area to ask for in order to be able to use the brand standards more effectively?
I highly recommend just the human approach of talking. If you have a connection in your creative team, saying, "Hey, I'm doing the best I can to follow the rules that you guys set forward. How can you explain things? Can you walk me through some of these? Like what cases am I supposed to be using this color in, or where can I find a download link for this font so I use it correctly?" Just I'm a full proponent of using the human approach and just asking who knows who wrote the standard, who knows that document best. Help me, please.
Thanks.
So, Eileen, this was a fabulous presentation,
Thank
above and
you.
beyond. I mean, it is extremely important for people who are designing, web applications, especially. That's what we covered here, that these considerations we made early on, and you gave us also hints and ways how to make it part of everybody's job.
Mhm.
And so that was very, very helpful, to transition, not only like right at the beginning, but saying it at the end. So I really appreciate that. Lisa, did you have a question?
No, well,
Oh,
hold on
sorry.
here. Sorry, we have some stuff going on. I don't know
Please.
why I'm not showing up. Oh, there we are. Not that. Okay. Hi. Also, so
Hi.
sorry I had to miss the whole first part of it. But I caught the last part of it, and that was equally as informative. So I'm sure the rest of it was incredible. So a lot of folks, like myself, who threw together here's a website. What would you say is like the number one thing that's like real low bar of entry that everyone should just really be looking at, should make sure they're doing when they're looking at marketing? I heard subtitles is a big one, but I'm sure there were a lot of tips. If you're like, hey, this is the lowest bar, please at least be doing X. What would that be?
My thing is making sure that there's enough color contrast. I like keeping things simple. If it's a simple layout with a nice big headline and then there's slightly smaller like a sub headline and then your body text, as long as everything is legible and all the important information is there, that is the bare bones and perfectly acceptable in the accessibility world.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for letting me do this. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we will, Vinny and I plan to do it tomorrow, actually, upload this, recording into our YouTube's thing. So Miss Lisa, Happy New Year. This is the first time I'm seeing you since the new year started. You'll be able to watch it all on YouTube pretty soon. And we will
Awesome.
send it out to everybody who registered. So this is good.
Well, great.
Thank
Well,
you for
thank you
starting
guys
off
so much.
our great year, Eileen.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
The month is almost over.
I know. I know.